Hello, I'm Colleen Hughes, and I'm going through my evaluation from our case scenarios. I'm going to read the case off first. So we have a 19-year-old male soccer player exiting the game holding his wrist. He approaches you and stated something isn't right. You asked the mechanism of injury, and he replied, "I went up for a header, the defender took me out and landed on my hand behind me." The athlete's chief complaint is pain near the styloid process of the radius. He is hesitant to move the wrist, but wants to continue play. So in this scenario, I'm going to say the right wrist is injured. And now I'm going to continue the evaluation from here. Hello, I'm Colleen. I'm going to be your clinician.
Hey.
So have you injured your wrist before?
No.
When you landed on your wrist, was it like in extension or in flexion when you fell down?
Extension.
Okay. What is your pain from a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being no pain, 10 being like the worst pain you've ever felt.
7.
Okay. And what type of pain are you feeling? Is it sharp, achy?
Sharp pain.
Okay. Do you have any numbness or tingling going down into your hand or fingers?
No.
No? Okay. I do not see a clear, obvious deformity on the wrist, but I'm going to do some palpations first. So first, I'm going to palpate the distal radius and radial styloid process. Do you have any pain with this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now next, I'm going to palpate the anatomical stuff box. I'm gonna put you in extension. Ulnar deviation, palpating here. Do you have pain with this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And there's tender to palpation. And then we're going to palpate the first metacarpal. Do you have pain with that?
No.
At all? Now we also see minor swelling over the radial side of the wrist upon inspection. And now we're going to go through active range of motion. So I'm going to have you first try to do thumb flexion and extension on both wrists and hands. Do you have any pain with that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Also on this side, just to compare bilaterally. Okay, and now we're gonna try to do wrist movements. So first we're gonna do, have you do wrist extension on both hands, wrist extension, and then down into wrist flexion with both hands. Do you have pain with this too?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're gonna do pronation and supination. So bring your palms down and then back up for supination. Pronation. Any pain with those movements as well?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then lastly, we're going to do ulnar and radial deviation. So ulnar deviation is when you bring your wrist out like this and then in like that. Painful? Okay, so with all active range of motion directions, we mostly see that extension, ulnar deviation, pronation, supination are all limited and painful. Flexion is full but also still painful. So now we're going to go through passive range of motion of the thumb and wrist. So first I'm going to do thumb flexion and extension. So down and then extension. With this, do you feel pain? Yes,
yeah.
It's also limited. Now we're going to try wrist flexion, extension, ulnar deviation while we're in this position. Radial deviation. Any painful with that?
Yes.
Yes. Is it still 7 out of 10?
Yes.
Okay. And then now we're gonna do pronation, supination. With this, we're gonna try to grip lightly, and then put them into pronation and supination like that. Did that alter or change your pain at all?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then we're gonna test this bilaterally. So we're gonna do passive range of motion on this side too. So this is thumb extension, thumb flexion, wrist flexion, wrist extension, ulnar deviation, radial deviation, and then once again we'll do the supination and pronation. With this, we see the involved side is limited and painful with passive range of motion. So after going through the history, learning that mechanism of injury was falling on a hyperextended wrist, point tenderness over the anatomical snuff box, a sharp pain, and very limited active range of motion, passive range of motion, and hesitant to move the wrist, I'm suspecting this athlete has a scaphoid fracture. So to confirm, I'm going to do a compression and distraction test of the wrist and a squeeze test. So I'm going to stabilize her hand here, and then we're gonna first do the wrist, compress this way. Does this produce pain?
Yes.
Yes. And then when I distract, does it relieve the pain?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then I'm also gonna do this on the thumb. Does that produce pain when I go down?
Yes.
And then when I release,
Mhm.
does that relieve the pain?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm also going to do the squeeze test where you squeeze proximally from where the point of pain is and we think the injury, and then just squeeze like this. And does that reproduce pain in the same radial wrist?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And from those findings with the compression and distraction test and the squeeze test, I suspect the athlete has a scaphoid fracture of their right wrist. So once we rule out a fracture, which I inspect that this injury is a fracture, we wouldn't want to do resistant range of motion or manual muscle tests because that would just produce more pain. So what we would want to do for treatment of this athlete is to splint their wrist in the position they came to as ice, and then refer them to x-rays to confirm a fracture. So from this point, I would not let this athlete back into the game since they have a fracture, or we suspect a fracture. So we just want to splint the wrist, ice it, get them to a referral to get x-rays. But if I were to do isometric resistance or manual muscle testing of the wrist, we would do wrist flexion and extension. So I'm just going to demonstrate what those look like. So you can just keep your hand here. And then this is isometric resistance of wrist extension. So just hold strong, don't let me move you. And then wrist flexion, hold strong, don't let me move you. We're going to do ulnar deviation, hold strong, don't let me move you. Radial deviation, hold strong, don't let me move you. And then for the pronation, supination, once again, we're in the handshake grip. And then I'm going to say, hold strong, don't let me move you for one direction, and then in the other direction, hold strong. I would suspect if I were to do this with a fracture, all those directions would be weak and painful. And then we would test that bilaterally as well, too. And then if we did manual muscle testing, I would expect lower grades because it'd be painful, so probably a grade of like a 2. But I would do first the extensor pollicis brevis manual muscle test. So this, we put them in extension and then of the thumb, and then have them hold strong, don't let me move you. And then we'd expect pain with that and weakness. And then for abductor pollicis longus of the thumb, I'm gonna have them put in abduction and then put resistance, so hold strong, don't let me move you. And with that, we'd be able, if this was injured, they wouldn't be able to hold it. And then next for the wrist extensors, we do the extensor carpi ulnaris. So here you can have them try to make a fist, and then we have them extend their wrist and then into ulnar deviation, and then I'm going to put them into, try to push them into wrist flexion and radial deviation, so hold strong, don't let me move you. And then next we have extensor carpi radialis brevis. So with this, their elbow is going to be flexed to 90 degrees, and then we'll extend their wrist and put them into radial deviation, and here we want to restrict this way, so hold strong, don't let me move you, and try to put them in the flexion and ulnar deviation. And then extensor carpi radialis longus, their elbow is extend it, and then we do the same restriction, so we put them in extension and radial deviation this way, and then we restrict the opposite direction. So hold strong to let me move you. And we can do the flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris, so that we can have them in supination. The wrist kind of off the treatment table you have them just put their hand out like this. Have them flex their wrist up, and then so flexor carpi radialis, they'll be in flexion and radial deviation. So we're gonna restrict that, so hold strong to let me move you. And then flexor carpi ulnaris, they'll be in flexion and ulnar deviation this way, so hold strong to let me move you. So for special tests, we did the compression distraction test and the squeeze test early on in the evaluation to rule out a fracture. But for different types of differential diagnoses, we could see either a scaphoid lunate, like ligament sprain or fracture, or instability there, or a distal radius fracture, and even a radial collateral ligament sprain. So with the radial collateral ligament sprain, we could do the varus stress test. So we can have the athlete have the wrist like this. We're gonna support proximally, kind of take their hand like this, and then put a stress on the radial collateral ligament on this side, and adduct their hand towards them, and that should put a stress, and we'll see laxity with that. For the scaphoid lunate instability, we can do the Watson's test, which their elbow's gonna be bent and have their hands like facing this way. We're gonna palpate where the scaphoid and lunate join in the hand, and we're gonna put them into extension and ulnar deviation, and then while we put them into that position, we're gonna force them into flexion and radial deviation. And if there was an instability or like type of ligament sprain there, we would feel a pop in this area where like the scaphoid and lunate are popping. But my final diagnosis for the injury, or what I inspect, is a scaphoid fracture. So with that, I would treat it with a splint, ice, and then not let the athlete return to the game, just because all the intricate hand bones, we want to make sure they heal correctly and don't form any necrosis in the future. And then we would refer the athlete to get x-rays just to confirm a scaphoid fracture. So thank you.